that are kind of in the same vein around how do you manage these really complex, we've talked a lot about who's in your bubble, I call it a germosphere sometime, who are you sharing germs with? And how far does that network of your germosphere extend? And there are people who are in really complex germospheres, bubbles that have different parts, and maybe the parts aren't in great communication with one another, and blended families. How do we navigate, for example, separated parents who are sharing custody of a child and going back and forth? And I think we can use this as a chance to talk more generally about how to open our bubbles and how to think about those more complicated germ sharing opportunities.
I mean, one thing that came to mind, knowing that we were maybe going to talk about this, is coming back to that idea of pooled risk and the things that you can personally control, so if you know that you have no choice but to be in partnership in a divorce situation or something else where you don't have all the control over what happens in that household, like, you can minimize the risks in your own household, and together the pooled risk becomes lower. And that maybe your first attempt, what you can do before going to mediation or going to a lawyer or, taking some other action to try to have more control over the situation.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts, but I know some people were raising whether it would be better to kind of change the arrangements to have longer stints with one parent instead of sort of 2 days a week. And my sense is, from an infection control standpoint, that might be better than splitting up multiple days, back and forth within 1 week. And over the summer, that might be more possible, I guess, to have more extended periods with one parent instead of switching back and forth, because that really brings together all these different social networks continuously if you're swapping kids all the time. So that's something to consider possibly over the summer if it works.
Right, and I think you can think carefully about how subsequent sort of either vacations or trips that a kid might take with different parts of the family. Again, where are the grandparents involved in that calendar, and can we put the grandparent exposure at a place in that calendar where it's going to be safest for them, and kind of lead those discussions with, we have some vulnerable people in this germ bubble. Let's prioritize their safety.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Alison, the timing of bookending visits potentially in a time frame that gives you the greatest sense that you've passed sort of that period where you may have symptoms and or you're kind of in the clear, and usually think about that as like a 2-week window.
So Alison brought this up before, but I also want to emphasize how important, in my experience, open communication is. And I know that's a real challenge in some blended family situations, but I think it's really critical to have open communication about what kinds of activities and what your risk tolerance is as you try to navigate all of these complicated interactions.